MSW Media.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 188 of Clean Up on Aisle 45. My God, 188 weeks we've been doing this. It's Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. I'm Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Strzok. We've got a lot to cover today, including both Brad Raffensperger and Brian Kemp going after the Georgia Election Board for their last-minute rule changes. Rudy Giuliani is complaining that Steve Bannon is being, quote-unquote, tortured in prison as he goes on a spending spree after complaining to his bankruptcy judge that he was close to being homeless. And Donald's appeal brief in Fulton County.
Oh, we have that. That's right. That was just that hit the docket on Monday. And we're also going to talk about the mess in the Michigan GOP. Oh, my God. We're going to talk about the hot mic mute button battle over the Harris-Trump ABC debate. And a judge has set a trial date for the Arizona fraudulent electors scheme case, the election interference case in 2020, where 18 of Trump's closest pals have been charged with felonies. But first, it's Hall of Fame Day on Clean Up on Aisle 45 for our Hall of Fame patrons. So we want to thank the Hall of Fame patrons. These are patrons that pitch in $10 or more. So thank you so much to Fran Reichenbach, David Chandler, Nathan Dorn. I believe it was Nathan Dorn who wanted me to read his name. I can't remember. But I think that was it. That's what stands out to me. Do you remember that, Pete?
No, I don't, unfortunately.
Somebody on a live show,
asking,
I think it was Nathan Dorn who was like, Pete always reads my name. I want AG to read my name. If that wasn't you, Nathan, I apologize to both you and Nathan Dorn and your families and affiliates. Please write in and let us know who that was. Christine G. Passion, Chris McCullough, Roberta Reed, David in Brooklyn, Clover's Tree 73, Lisa Rollison, Meg Alexander, Maria Tovar, Karen Sherman, and Stephen Potter. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As you know, we couldn't do this without you. It's because of you that we're able to have all these galas and meet and greets and have VIP meet and greets before our live shows, and to travel to things like the Trump trial in Manhattan, the January 6th hearings, and of course, the Democratic National Convention. We couldn't do any of this without you. Thank you for supporting independent media. We really appreciate it. If you want to become a patron and help out, you can do it at patreon.com/aisle45pod. That's AISLE 45POD. So we had such a great time these past 2 weeks. A couple weeks ago, we had our live show in DC and our second patron gala of the year. And then, of course, our live show in San Francisco after the DNC wrapped up. And I got to say, Pete, I had a really incredible time meeting everybody.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, talk about the excitement and in DC at the run up to the convention, and then after, just an amazing convention to go out to San Francisco and meet so many amazing supporters. It was just fantastic. Love the folks, love the enthusiasm, love just how down to earth and amazing our listeners are. And, you can't go wrong in San Francisco. It's such an amazing, beautiful city. I had a blast. And so thank you to all of you who came out. Thank you to all of you who have gone to all the other shows and live tapings in the past. It was just a great time. And to see you there and to have Olivia Troy, just fresh herself, both of you coming from the convention, was really special.
She spoke at the convention.
Yeah,
she did an incredible job.
Yep.
And so it was an honor to have her, my friend Olivia Troy, join us in San Francisco. And it was great to meet everybody ahead of of the show. It was wonderful to have our patrons there, and then the audience was just incredible. The Q&A was amazing. We're going to release that live footage for you in October, when I have promised everyone in my life that I am going to take a vacation. And Pete, you're actually going to take over Clean Up on Aisle 45 that week.
I am. I've got to figure out if I'm going to get a special secret mystery host, co-host that week or not. But I'd be remiss to say also, the other neat thing about San Francisco and the venue at the Swedish American Hall is perhaps one of my more favorite recent photos of you and I in the green room sitting in a Wes Anderson-esque little, it was a very, it was another like conference room, right? But they turned it into a green room, but it was big, high ceilinged, and completely empty except for this couch between two pillars, which was very amazing.
Yeah, it was. We set up a Wes Anderson shot. I shared it out on Twitter. And yeah, that was such a cool venue, and the staff there was so wonderful and generous. Yep. So I just want to give a shout out to them as well. All right. As the campaign heats up, Donald Trump is back to complaining about the September 10th ABC debate, because this is what he does all the time. This is from Reuters. The campaigns of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris clashed on Monday over next month's U.S. presidential debate, with the vice president's team seeking a return to open microphones, while her Republican rival threatened to pull out entirely, suggesting the previously agreed upon ABC network is biased. Quote, "Why would I do the debate against Kamala Harris on that network?" Trump, who is making his third bid for the White House, and I think somebody tweeted like no one should be subject to 3 Trump candidacies, wrote in a social media post late Sunday night on Truth Social, which is down 5% today, even though the stock market closed at a record high again, that accused the network of the bias. And he said, stay tuned, as if to hint that maybe he's not going to go. A Harris spokesperson, Brian Fallon, said Monday the vice president's campaign wanted the broadcaster to keep the candidates' microphones on throughout the event, not muted when their opponent was speaking, as in the last presidential debate. And let me remind you, that last presidential debate was June 27th between Trump and President Joe Biden. So-called, quote, hot mics can help or hurt political candidates, catching offhand comments that sometimes were not meant for the public.
And wasting no opportunity, the increasingly all-star Harris campaign statement writers put out a new one saying, quote, "We have told ABC and other networks seeking to host a possible October debate that we believe both candidates' mics should be live throughout the full broadcast. Our understanding is that Trump's handlers prefer the muted microphone because they don't think their candidate can act presidential for 90 minutes on his own. We suspect Trump's team has not even told their boss about this dispute because it would be too embarrassing to admit they don't think he can handle himself against Vice President Harris without the benefit of a mute button." And it turns out they probably were right, because then Trump campaign senior advisor Jason Miller said in a statement they had already agreed to the same terms as CNN's June debate, which had muted microphones, adding, quote, "We said no changes to the agreed upon rules," unquote. But Trump, as laying out exactly the path that the Harris campaign laid out, then Trump later told reporters, this is all the same day, Trump later told reporters that he preferred to have his microphone kept on, adding that he did not like it muted last time and that he was not preparing much for the face-off against his new rival. Quote, "Doesn't matter to me. I'd rather have it on, probably. I'd rather have it probably on. But the agreement was that it would be the same as it was last time," Trump said. Now, there is no doubt in my mind, I would much rather, as you said, would much rather have the mics on. I do not think Trump can control himself. I think he is clearly a petulant child. He's been a petulant child for the bulk of his career. This would do nothing but highlight it. I think that, I think this is one area that agreement was made out of concern about the back and forth and whether or not Trump would steamroll President Biden in a way that he absolutely would not be able to do to Harris. And I would love to see it. I'd love to see him try.
Yeah, and I actually tweeted out on June 28th, the day after the CNN Biden-Trump debate. I said at first, I thought the mute button was a good idea. But in a debate, without fact-checking in real time by the moderators, all it did was keep Joe quiet while Trump spewed lies uninterrupted and unchallenged for 2 minutes at a time. So again, I know that the Harris campaign is like, keep the mics on so that you can hear what a petulant what a petulant child he is. Sorry, we're trying to save the swearing for the bonus episode. But I think there's another point to this too, allowing him to just continue on uninterrupted for 2 minutes with his gish gallop, as Ruth Ben-Ghiat and Heather Cox Richardson call it. I think that did a huge disservice, especially since the CNN moderator said, we're not going to fact check any of this in real time.
How else are they going to get the accolades, which I've counted at least 5 separate occasions where Trump has said, what a great job Jake Tapper and Dana Bash did on CNN. And they really gave him a fair shake, and it was really great. And I'm telling you, the only groups of people that Trump seems to compliment are Eileen Cannon, this time with Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, and, Fox News sometimes when they're, genuflecting to him. So that repeated compliment, and DOJ IG Mike Horowitz, I have to throw that in there.
Right.
He is thrilled about IG Horowitz's report. So go figure what it is that makes Trump rave about you, and I'll tell you what you can think about yourself.
Yeah, and in the Biden-Trump debate that happened in June, both sides agreed that the moderators would not fact check in real time. And so when you take away the ability, when you mute the mics and you don't fact check, I think that combination is really bad. And I believe that this debate also, the moderators have agreed not to fact check in real time, but having hot mics on all the time allows real time fact checking by the other candidate. And I think that Kamala Harris is extremely prepared to do that, despite the wall of lies that's going to come out of his mouth. I mean, the man in 2 minutes can lie 110 times. So, because he averages a lie every couple of seconds. So I think that you can't have both, right? You can't have the mute and the no fact check. So I think that this is the right strategy by the Harris campaign. It's what was agreed to. But now Trump, of course, like he always does, I don't want it. And then she goes, we want it. And he goes, yeah, no, I want it. Kind of like, we talked a little bit about at the live show where Trump has refused to take classified briefings because he'll be accused of leaking. Well, I'm going to refuse classified briefings, which says to me that he has been denied classified briefings by Joe Biden. Joe Biden denied him classified briefings back in 2021 because former presidents are often able to continue to get classified briefings after they leave office. And Joe Biden prohibited that from happening because he was so erratic and played so fast and loose with classified information that he barred that from happening. So there's no official confirmation of this, but I am 100,000,000% certain that Joe Biden has refused to allow him to have classified briefings, which then prompted Trump to say, I'm refusing classified briefings, in kind of a you can't fire me, I quit sort of petulant child way. And I feel like that's exactly what's happening with this hot mic issue. No, we want the mute button. And then Harris says, oh, you're a chicken shit if you don't let me have a hot mic. I've decided I don't really care about it, but I want hot mics. Like it's him. It's his way. It's the way that he does things. And he waffles on these things so much. And I think it's not just a sign of his inability to commit to anything, but it's a sign of he's just flailing. He doesn't know how to run against Kamala Harris. And he continues to show this in his absolutely inept responses to her campaigns, her statements, the DNC, her rallies, anything that she says. He just has no idea how to run against her. And he keeps pining for Joe Biden to get back into the race, calling it a coup that they removed him, which is actually really just our party's nominating process, as per the rules, which are something we're allowed to do ourselves and aren't outlined in the Constitution. But that's just his way. He's a chicken shit. He's transactional, and he's incapable of dealing with this changing of the guard.
Yeah, and he's still posting on social media about Joe Biden, even though everybody is telling him focus on your opponent coming up. But this muting of the mics, it's a no win for the Democrats, because I take a little bit the observation that, look, we are debate moderators. We're not conducting the interview. It's not our job to fact check. And I can understand the logic of that argument a little bit. But the problem comes in when, like you said, if you're muted and you get a 2-minute vomiting lies, a gish gallop of falsehoods, you're then in the position of like, all right, the other side just spewed falsehoods for 2 minutes straight. And either I try and correct everyone, which I can't because it's going to take me 20 seconds to correct every 5-second lie. And I'm spending all my time responding rather than saying something that I want to say. And if the moderators are not going to do that or even follow up with a question or a fact assertion question, then just follow up and say, well, it's interesting, but isn't it true that, in fact, X many thousand jobs were lost during your administration? Or isn't it true, actually, that your successor lowered insulin prices 30? You don't have to fact check, but ask a question. But no, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash were amazing. They were wonderful. It tells you everything you need to know. So I agree. There is, short of Donald Trump getting the perception that not having a live mic somehow emasculates him, and people might get under his skin enough they don't say, turn him on. I just don't think there's nobody, I guarantee you this, there's nobody in his campaign in and around him who wants those microphones live because he cannot control himself. And he will behave like a child, having a black woman who he also, I think, finds attractive, which messes him up even more, it will cause him to melt down. I'm so looking forward to this debate. And by God, if we can get hot mics, that is Black Watch Party, start drinking, start tailgating at 11 in the morning, because it's going to be something to behold.
It will be something to behold. All right. We have a lot of news going on down in Georgia as well, Pete, and I want to talk about that with you and our listeners. But we do have to take a quick break. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. We have more Hall of Fame patrons to thank, including Ren Special K Kadu, a dinosaur in dental school, Jason Brzoska, apologies if I messed up the pronunciation of that, Patty B, Scott Grieg, Catherine Gilbert White is totally awesome at her job, Steve Towle, Suzanne Ashworth, Janine Iorga, boy, would I love to be the bus driver, Jeffrey Kinsher, ATX Polar Bear, and Charles Jones. Thank all of you so much for being such important members of the team. I couldn't do this without you, and you truly go above and beyond, and want to especially thank you as Hall of Fame patrons for everything you do. So with that, let's go down to Georgia. Now, as you know, Judge McAfee ruled that Fani Willis's office could continue prosecuting the 2020 election interference case against Trump and his allies if either she or Nathan Wade stepped aside. Now, Wade left the case, but nevertheless, Trump appealed the ruling, arguing that Fani Willis should still be disqualified. We went over Fani Willis's appeal brief, and Monday, Trump filed his. First, Trump argues, quote, the state's standing argument should be deemed abandoned. Alternatively, President Trump was aggrieved by Willis's church speech, a severe violation of the Georgia rules of professional conduct.
Yeah, and now on standing, right, Trump says the state's ephemeral reference to standing fails for two reasons. First, due to an absence of any citation to authority, this court's local rules dictate that response argument 3 be deemed abandoned. Second, President Trump was aggrieved by the trial court's failure to disqualify Willis and suffered adverse personal impact from Willis's church speech. So Trump is saying Fani Willis's argument that he doesn't have standing to appeal is wrong because he was harmed when she made her remarks at the church and apparently abandoned argument 3A. He doesn't really go into that, doesn't explain it very well. It's a very poorly organized filing, per usual, from this team. But it goes on to say, according to the state, as long as it refrains from saying, quote, the defendant is guilty, unquote, a prosecutor may do and say anything, no matter how defamatory, unethical, or widely reported it is, because time is a sufficient cure for harm. The state contends this court is without recourse to punish the offending prosecutor and must disregard the deliberate ethical violations, false allegations of racism, and claims to, quote, doing God's work, unquote, because the case will not be tried soon. Nonsense, Trump says. Now, the lower court already decided her speech wasn't disqualifying, but he's appealing here because he's arguing that it is, and that's what gives him standing.
Yeah, and he closes with this. Whether this court focuses on Willis's calculated playing the race card to engender public condemnation, her unprofessionalism, or the odor of mendacity, the outcome must be the same, disqualification. Willis flagrantly violated the Georgia rules of professional conduct, and her forensic misconduct was calculated and egregious. Willis must therefore be disqualified. For the foregoing reasons, President Trump respectfully requests this court to vacate in part the order denying his motion to disqualify the prosecutor and remand his case to the trial court with instructions that indictment 223 SC 188947 be dismissed. Alternatively, that Willis and her office be disqualified from further participation in these proceedings.
Yeah, and to actually put the words "playing the race" card in a court filing is pretty racist. I'd never seen that happen before. But in other Georgia news, the Georgia Board of Elections is trying to sow confusion and make it difficult to vote by enacting a series of rule changes at the very last minute, at the 11th hour. But Brad Raffensperger and Governor Kemp and a few other folks in Georgia, they aren't having it. Here's a statement from Brad Raffensperger's office. Quote, activists seeking to impose last-minute changes in election procedures outside the legislative process undermine voter confidence and burden election workers. The General Assembly knew that quick reporting of results and certification is paramount to voter confidence and passed SB 202, but misguided attempts by the state election board will delay election results and undermine the chain of custody safeguards. Georgia voters reject this 11th hour chaos, and so should the unelected members of the state election board. That goes on to say Georgia voters deserve confidence that the election results will be timely reported on election night as required by SB 202 and SB 189. Misguided efforts to impose new procedures like hand counting ballots at polling locations make it likely that Georgians will not know the results on election night. Additionally, he continues, having poll workers handle ballots at polling locations after they've been voted introduces a new and significant risk to chain of custody procedures. Georgia law already has a secure chain of custody and secure chain of custody protocols for handling ballots, and efforts to change these laws by unelected bureaucrats on the eve of the election introduces the opportunity for error, lost or stolen ballots, and fraud.
Yeah, that was last week. And then just this past weekend, Republican Governor Brian Kemp asked the AG for guidance on whether he has the authority to remove members of the state election board.
Oh.
Voting rights groups, Democrats, and even some Republicans have raised alarms about the right-wing majority's recent votes. As Max Flugrath points out on Twitter, he does have that authority. Now here's a citation from Georgia Code 45-10-4. Upon formal charges being filed with the governor relative to a violation of Code Section 45-10-3 on the part of a member of any such board, commission, or authority, the governor or his designated agent shall conduct a hearing for the purpose of receiving evidence relative to the merits of such charges. The member so charged shall be given at least 30 days' notice prior to such hearing. If such charges are found to be true, the governor shall forthwith remove such member from office, and the vacancy shall be filled as provided by law. Such hearing shall be held in accordance with Chapter 13 of Title 50, the Georgia Administrative Procedure Act, and judicial review of any such decision shall be in accordance with such chapter. I have no doubt that, one, Georgia is going to quite likely be a disaster, and two, it is specifically because all of the effort that Trump and his campaign and those supporting him are putting into undermining Georgia. And I'm certain it's going on in other states, but it has not been as apparent anywhere else as absolutely it is in Georgia. And I think, again, we were talking about this, and, if anybody during out in San Francisco, if anybody was worried about a particular state, and it was unanimously Georgia. So, we'll see what comes. I do think, part of this, if they can't certify their votes, that it doesn't hold up the election. It just removes them from the equation, and the majority needed, or the number of votes changes to reflect the absence of any state which doesn't certify their electoral votes. So, the worst case, all these shenanigans simply take Georgia's votes out of play, but it's just beginning to look like such an extraordinary amount of corrupt shenanigans that are going down with the Republicans down there.
But there is time, per this statute, for Brian Kemp to call a hearing to decide whether or not to remove these 3 election board members. They have to give 30-day notice of the hearing. And if he does that in the next week or so, he can have the hearing like toward the end of September and then remove them, replace them, and put everything back the way that it was. But that's still, if the point is to cause confusion, then, that may very well have already been accomplished by the time he replaces these board members and gets everything back to where it was, because he would have to fill these vacancies based on the Georgia law on filling vacancies. And I assume he would replace these MAGA folks with, I don't know, regular Republicans. I don't know what to call them anymore. More like Raffensperger Kemp Republicans than MAGA Republicans and election denier Republicans. So we'll see how he handles this. But if I were you, I would put my money on Brian Kemp possibly calling for a hearing in order to investigate what these election board members are doing, and possibly to have them removed in time to replace them and put everything back in order before the election. So we'll see what happens, but we'll keep an eye on it for you, obviously, because that's how we roll. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think he'll bother having these hearings?
I don't know. I don't know if he's going to do that preemptively before they start causing problems at or around the time of the vote. I mean, if he does it at any time, it is going to become fodder for Trump talking about how corrupt the process is, that it's undemocratic, that Georgia's stealing the election from him, and Tulsi and RFK Jr. and everybody, Tucker and everybody else will start talking about how undemocratic it is, and it's more of the Biden-Harris coup crime family.
Yeah, they'll do that anyway, though.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm not certain whether he will do it now or wait until like clear shenanigans start happening. And unfortunately, a lot of that isn't going to be until the vote is upon us. So we'll see. It's not. I'm worried. I don't
know.
Georgia.
I call shenanigans on these rule changes, but yeah, we'll see. And we'll let you know. We have a lot more news still to get to in this show, including stuff that's going on in Arizona and Michigan with the fraudulent elector scheme, the 2020 election interference cases. But we have to take a quick break, so everybody stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. All right, we have more Hall of Fame patrons to thank, including Star Lanus, Je suis fatigue, Dr. David, Sharon Tukolsky, Don't Memory Hole the Sacrifices Americans Made for Each Other During the Pandemic as Once-in-a-Generation Display of True Patriotism. D. Gill, that's no relation. Veterinary for America 2024, The Tyrant We Deserve. At Dirt Road Dems, Laura Saba, January 20 Baby, Deborah Kirby. Devil went down to Georgia. He was looking for an election to steal. He was in a bind. He was way behind by 11,780 votes. And Kimberly D. Stephen, thank you so much. Again, as you know, we couldn't do any of this without you. And we shake each and every one of your hands if we could. So instead, we give you shout outs on the show. And if you want to become a patron, we will give you a shout out with whatever name you enter in. So you can do that. You can see some of these folks get really creative with how they're referred to on the Patreon page. So you can do that at patreon.com/aisle45pod. All right, next story is from Zachary Cohen at CNN. An Arizona judge has set the trial date of January 5th, 2026. Okay? 2026. For allies, and I'm not kidding. No, usually that's something I would say.
Now, right?
That's usually something I would say.
No. 18 months.
Yeah, that's usually something I would say snarkily, right? Like, but no, 2026. For allies of former President Donald Trump charged for criminal conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election. At a hearing on Monday, which is ongoing, several defendants, including conservative attorney John Eastman and multiple Arizona Republicans who served as fake electors, were present in the courtroom. Former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani, Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani, Christina Bobb, who serves as the top lawyer for the RNC on election integrity. They joined the hearing virtually. This is the first high-stakes hearing since a grand jury handed up criminal charges against the fake electors from Arizona. Trump himself was not charged, and we went over why and why that might have not happened in the previous episode. But Arizona's attorney general has charged the Trump allies with committing multiple felonies on the same occasion. a designation under state law that means a conviction would likely carry prison sentences rather than lesser penalties afforded to first-time offenders. Oops.
Yeah, no. Arizona Superior Court Judge Bruce Cohen, who was appointed in 2005 by then Governor Janet Napolitano, a Democrat, acknowledged that the trial date is a quote-unquote moving target, which, again, 16 months from now, Allison, we'll be talking about on Cleanup episode 204. No, God, no. It's like, no, we got to do like, that's weeks, not months. So
18
I don't
times
even want
4
to do the math. Don't
like
even want to do the math. You can do the math while I keep describing the pivotal hearing.
Like 72
Yeah,
weeks.
70, it's going to be like 280 or something, right? God almighty. The pivotal hearing comes just days after Trump, who has not been charged in the Arizona case, but is described in court documents as, quote unquote, unindicted co-conspirator 1, held a rally in the key swing state as part of his 2024 presidential campaign. Trump has avoided having to stand trial in either of the two criminal cases where he was charged for attempting to overturn the 2020 election, but Monday's hearing in Arizona underscores how many of those who sought to help the former president remain in power still face significant legal exposure as a result. Most members of the grand jury in Arizona that indicted the 18 Trump allies for their alleged roles in attempting to overturn the 2020 election had also expressed interest in charging the former president. Now, the interest was strong enough that it prompted the state's lead prosecutor to request that the grand jury not indict the former president and give a PowerPoint presentation to explain his reasoning, according to court documents.
Yeah, I think that was a mistake. But, I mean, it is what it is. And I'm not too surprised by a January 5th, 2026 trial date. I mean, these things take forever. And we've got, 18 defendants here? Well, we'll see what ends up happening. All right, let's head over to Michigan, where the state Republican Party is in shambles. This story comes from the Detroit News, Pete. Former Michigan Republican Party chairwoman Christina Caramo was escorted out of the state Republican convention on Saturday by police as the gathering of delegates got off to a raucous start inside the Dort Financial Center in Flint. Dort in Flint. Fantastic. At about noon, another individual, whom the Detroit News couldn't immediately identify, was also taken out of the arena by a group of police with his arms bound behind his back after security said he was yelling at people around him in the crowd. As for Caramo, I don't know how to pronounce her name. If you do, send it in. I want to get it right. She showed up on the convention floor at about 11 a.m., but the party said she was not a registered delegate from her home county of Oakland. She was surrounded by her supporters with security officials attempting to talk to her. Now, eventually, Pete, 2 police officers with badges walked Caramo off the floor amid shoving between a security guard and one of the people with Caramo. Police later walked her through the lobby as she took questions from reporters and walked her then out of the arena. Quote, "I'm here to support a candidate," she said, as police were escorting her out of the lobby of the arena. Michigan GOP chairman Pete Hoekstra and his thugs are trying to have me thrown out of this convention. That was her statement to the press.
Now, in a statement from Michigan GOP Executive Director Tyson Shepard, he said Caramo was not a registered delegate for Saturday's convention, and she had been offered a guest credential, but she refused to take it.
Oh.
After Caramo was escorted out of the convention, the second and different individual was forced out of the arena and appeared to be arrested by Flint police officers. The man could be heard labeling Hoekstra a fake chair as police removed him. Caramo, a former Secretary of State candidate and a favorite among the party's grassroots wing, was elected the state party's chairwoman in February 2023. Then, the following January, a group of Michigan Republican State Committee members, frustrated by her leadership style and struggles to raise money, voted to oust her, while another group voted to keep her. In February, a Kent County Circuit Court judge determined Caramo had been removed in accordance with party bylaws, and the judge legally recognized Pete Hoekstra, a former member of the U.S. House, as the new chairman. Hoekstra was booed by some of the hundreds of delegates in attendance as he attempted to address the convention on Saturday morning.
All right, let me just add my own flavor to that last statement, because Hoekstra, they say, was booed by some of the hundreds of delegates in attendance. No, he was booed resoundingly by most of the people in that arena. So it was a lot of booing. You can check the video out on social media. Now, Taylor, the lawyer who was seeking a Republican nomination for the Michigan Supreme Court, said on Saturday, this is the candidate that Karamo wanted to support by being a delegate on the floor. So Taylor said on Saturday she had given Karamo passes to get on the convention floor to whip votes for her campaign. Taylor said she was disappointed that Karamo had been forced out of the building. Quote, "We are not in middle school. You don't have to like who I like. I don't have to like who you like, but we can still be on the same team." Now, I don't know about you, Pete, but telling a group of Michigan Republicans that we're not in middle school doesn't seem to be working. It just doesn't.
And you cannot, I'm telling you, you cannot keep up with all of the dysfunction on the Republican Party in Michigan. And I was thinking, I remember reading it just this weekend. Matthew DePerno, you might remember, by the way, indicted for illegally breaching election machines in Michigan, just on Saturday withdrew his bid for a seat on the Michigan Supreme Court and said, well, I don't think, I should be running. So it doesn't matter where the Republican Party in Michigan, particularly those MAGA folks who were working with Trump, who are running around up in northwestern Michigan trying to get access to voting machines up there. So many people indicted by Dana Nessel and her folks. They can't even have their party leader successfully speak on the floor. And I'm very curious, even though polling is saying, Michigan is somewhat tight between Trump and Harris, I can't help but think that all of this discontent and illegality and trials that are coming up is going to have a pretty significant effect on the presidential race and the down ballot races, frankly. I mean, you've got a super competitive Senate race coming up, and this is doing nothing good for the Republicans.
Well, yeah, and that and all of the money that would normally go from, presidential campaign coffers to the RNC is being diverted to the Save America PAC to pay his legal bills. And, I had no idea, Pete, until you just mentioned it, that there was somebody running for Michigan Supreme Court who has been indicted. He's been indicted on felony charges, but it's not surprising, right? I mean, we have Christina Bobb who's indicted, and she is the election integrity czar for the RNC. And then, of course, the leader of their party has been indicted in 4 jurisdictions and convicted on 34 felony counts in Manhattan. And, we're going to talk a little bit. We talked a little bit on the Daily Beans yesterday because Ambassador Norm Eisen has written up an op-ed for MSNBC as to why he thinks that the Manhattan sentencing should not be delayed. And I know we talked about it at length during our live shows in both D.C. and over in San Francisco, because there's that 48-hour window, right? The judge has till September 16th to decide whether or not he's going to allow, or he's going to say that this evidence is admissible under the new immunity rules. But then the sentencing is 2 days later, and we assume Trump is going to swoop in and appeal if Judge Merchan says we can go forward with sentencing. Trump's going to try to swoop in and say, no, I am allowed an interlocutory appeal. Everything must stop. That's what interlocutory appeals do. Stop everything and allow me to appeal this before we go any further, in this case with sentencing. However, because the Supreme Court was so wishy-washy and confusing and ridiculous with their immunity ruling, none of us really know for sure whether official acts evidence being admitted into a trial is interlocutory. We know that official acts on immunity are interlocutory, but they didn't comment. They just left that out. And so that is why Alvin Bragg is leaving it up for the judge to decide. But as we went over on the Beans yesterday, Norm Eisen, good old Ambassador Norm Eisen, who's usually right about everything, thinks that the judge does not have to delay the sentencing.
Well,
though I do think though that if he does go forward with the sentencing and DA Alvin Bragg recommends jail time, but he's going to file that sentencing recommendation under seal, so we won't know what it is until sentencing. If all that happens and the judge decides to sentence him to any jail time, I am 99.9% certain that he will not go to jail until the resolution of his appeal.
For sure. I don't see any scenario where he goes to jail prior to the resolution of the appeal. I do think it is going to get appealed in that 48-hour time period, and I would not be surprised. I wish I had Norm and yours optimism, but I do think they'll postpone the sentencing. But I did want to last little bit of shade in terms of where things unsaid and where all that Trump money is not going because of legal fees. This is going back to Michigan. And this is via Paul Egan at the Detroit Free Press. One thing DePerno did not say when he withdrew from running for the Supreme Court. And remember, he ran against Dana Nessel and lost by 8 points. One thing, though, that he didn't mention when he withdrew was that campaign finance records show he had raised just over $100 for his Supreme Court bid. That'll also throw a kink into things if you're expecting any sort of money from, slavishly giving your away to the MAGA god. And this is how he repays you. $100 for your Supreme Court bid.
Yeah, you aren't going to get any money down ballot.
You can go JD Vance and get a couple of dozen donuts and a box of coffee, whatever seems right.
Trump's dumping money into ad buys in Florida. You might as well just light that cash on fire. It's I think awesome that the Democrats and the Harris-Walz campaign are forcing him to spend money in states that a Republican shouldn't have to spend money in. But anyway, just my 2 cents. I know we're supposed to be fair and balanced and apolitical, but I'm totally not. And that's why we're independent media. So thanks again to our patrons who support us. We have more Hall of Fame patrons to thank and a couple of updates on Rudy Giuliani, but we have to take one last quick break. Everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Here is our last batch of Hall of Fame patrons that would like to thank Greg Kreimer, Harris for President, Kirkland J. Bateman, Christine Tackner. Please don't read this on the pod. We don't need a call out. Thanks for what you do. Triple G, Mitchell, football season, baby. Go Broncos. Berta 5078, Pete Strzok's Ball Tan Salon, Mr. Half Speed, Tiffany Trump was adopted, and Maris Lawson. Thank all of you so much for your support. All of you Hall of Fame patrons are amazing and simply in awe and honored and humbled by your support. And thank you so very much. And like all good shows, we try when we can to wrap up with Rudy Giuliani.
Or people in prison.
Or people around him or near him. And as an aside, Catherine Fries, who, as we talk about low-level people who like up to shenanigans, and she is one who deserves to be charged because the amount she was deep in with Rudy and sending everything on Proton Mail and Hush Mail. And I think she is one of a handful of folks who were deeply in no good, in my opinion, criminally, and are, I think, going to escape any sort of accountability across the board here. But setting that aside, her relationship to Rudy is what's important here. And then this is from Newsweek. Rudy Giuliani spent $44,746 a month after telling a bankruptcy court that he could be left homeless, new figures show. His expense on the verge of being homeless included everything from a Florida yacht club, dining at a Harley-Davidson museum, and maid service for his luxury Florida apartment.
Everybody I know who lives paycheck to paycheck, Pete, to be fair, often goes to yacht clubs and dines out at Harley-Davidson museums and gets maid service for
right. And I guarantee you, looking at Rudy, he did not pay that maid service enough. I guarantee you that just from the appearance of the man. And now Giuliani spent, I'd love to throw these figures out with all their precision, $178,987 in the 4 months from April 1 to August 2nd, according to accounts he has submitted to Judge Sean Lane in New York bankruptcy court. Giuliani's $44,746 monthly spending is about 10 times what the average American earns. In the first quarter of 2024, the average monthly income was $4,935, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, in a court filing back on March 28th, Giuliani warned that he could, quote, join the ranks of the homeless, unquote, if he is forced to sell his multi-million-dollar apartments in New York and Florida. His New York apartment was placed on the market for $6.5 million last year and later withdrawn. Giuliani valued his Florida apartment at $3.5 million in a previous bankruptcy court submission. The latest filing states that Giuliani would, quote-unquote, be irreparably harmed if he had to sell his West Palm Beach apartment in Florida. The filing by Giuliani's lawyer said that Giuliani's credit committee cannot leave him with nowhere to live. Quote, surely the committee does not intend Mr. Giuliani to join the ranks of the homeless. He goes on to say that Giuliani should be allowed to keep his Florida apartment because he needs, quote, a place to operate the podcast from if he is to earn money therefrom. However,
well, I always, Pete, I mean, I require a $3.5 million home to record. Don't you?
Yeah, well, I prefer beach condos. It's better. The ambience and the lighting I find is more conducive to my artistic and independent media, creative spirit. But only if there's a maid service. Only if there's a maid service to keep it tidy.
What if we had the sound of the ocean in the background like that? I think that might be
might
be nice. Let's see if we can get Molly to add that to the story.
No. Shockingly enough, the latest figures show that Giuliani's spending continued after he expressed his concerns about homelessness.
Yeah, and let's get into the details, because just days after his homelessness claims, Giuliani paid $21,000 in 2 installments in fees for his New York apartment to the owner's corporation that runs the building. That's his HOA, basically. The following month, he paid $15,995 in management fees for his condo in South Lake Palm Beach and paid similar fees for both buildings in the following quarter. On April 16th, he spent $148 at a Palm Beach yacht club. And on July 1st, he made 3 purchases totaling over $700 at Conscious, a health food supplement company. In June, he spent $121 at Mariella Pizza in Lexington Avenue, New York. On May 1st, there was $195 spent to the Mary Maids cleaning service for his Florida apartments. And you're right, $195 to clean a $3.5 million apartment is bullshit. That is bullshit. There was also $2,400 paid to a Long Island moving and storage company on July 7th. That's where he's moving all of his turntables and microphones. And over $130 at the restaurant bar in the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee during the RNC. His trip to the convention also included $143 in the bar restaurant at the Harley-Davidson Museum. Giuliani declared bankruptcy in December of last year, as we know, after a jury awarded $148 million to 2 Georgia election workers, namely Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who won a defamation lawsuit against him. As an attorney for Donald Trump in 2020, Giuliani falsely accused mother and daughter, Freeman and Moss, of adding ballots for Joe Biden, who won the state. Giuliani has to give the bankruptcy court a quarterly report on his income and spending as part of his bankruptcy filing. So this is just what he's reporting to the court. And he has a very long history of lying in his reports to the court. So I bet there is more money that he's spending that he's kind of maybe hiding or masking through his kid, Andrew Giuliani, somehow. This is just what he reported to the court.
Of course. And what's stunning about this, if I'm reading it correctly, he paid similar, these are the condo fees, he paid similar fees for both buildings the following quarter. So every 3 months, he is paying roughly $5,000 a month in management for his Florida condo and $7,000 a month for his New York apartment. So that's not mortgage. That's not principal and interest. That is $12,000 just for the condo fees. Yeah. $12,000 a month.
Yep. And now he's hoping to come out of bankruptcy, a request that Lane will sign off on, the judge, once Giuliani pays a $331,000 financial investigation company fee. This was like basically a company hired by the creditors like Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. He has to pay that fee. It's $331,000. And that's when, once he pays that, he can come out of bankruptcy. And that's when Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss can start seizing stuff. So we'll keep an eye on it for you. And I hope that he's miserable.
Yeah, but let it not be said that Rudy doesn't care about others, right? Because in another Rudy story from the Daily Beast, Rudy is saying that Steve Bannon is being denied access to TV in prison and essentially, this quote, tortured Unquote.
This sounds like me when I would be grounded when I was like 13 because they would take my TV and my bike away.
Torture.
It was
your phone,
torture.
They unplug the cord, so it's just the handset and the base.
They take the cord away. One time, my mother removed my door from my bedroom door from the hinges, so I couldn't have privacy.
Torture.
Torturous. Absolutely torturous.
And a conversation with Mike
like Stellar
Pillows.
Winds.
Torture. RDI program. Torture. In a conversation with My Pillow CEO Mike Lindell before he was taken down by young Noah at the DNC. 12-year-old Noah handed him his ass.
Okay, let me talk. We have to talk about that.
Go ahead.
For a second.
Yeah, let's go diversion. Since I brought it up, tell us about Noah, the
12-year-old kid, brilliant kid,
literally
Mike
12.
Lindell.
We're not kidding. He is 12 years old.
Mike Lindell shaved his mustache and went like incognito, got credentials into the DNC, and he's yelling at Noah. He's yelling at this. You don't even know there's 350,000 votes missing, and three Democratic candidates just a couple of counties away went from third place to first place after the votes were found. And Noah's like, "What's your source?" And he's like, "These are Democrats." Okay, well, give me a name. Barbara, but I'm not going to tell you the last name. And he's like, okay. Noah goes, oh, so your source is Trust Me, Bro? That was brilliant. And then, of course, when he was like, Mike Lindell's, he's pointing, he's wagging his finger in this kid's face, yelling at him and saying like, 350,000 votes were missing. You can't even tell me. It's like, you don't even keep up with the news. And he's like, I'm keeping up with your bankruptcy.
12 years old. 12 years old.
And he just kept going on and yelling. Mike Lindell just kept rattling off just absolute nonsense. And finally, Noah just looks at him, gives him the side eye and says, okay, dude, okay, bye. And just sort of walked away. And I know Seth Meyers pointed this out. He's like, the 12-year-old had the common sense to end that conversation. It was really, really funny. Anyway, so Rudy's talking to Lindell.
He's talking to Mike Lindell. And Giuliani says Bannon is being unfairly treated while he serves his 4-month sentence at the Federal Correctional Institute in Danbury, Connecticut for defying a congressional subpoena. Quote, Bannon unfortunately can't hear this broadcast, which is an outrage, Giuliani said. I ran the Bureau of Prisons in 2 capacities. First, I was absolutely in charge of it as the Associate Attorney General for 2 years under Ronald Reagan. And then I was the chief of staff of the guy who was in charge of it under Gerald Ford. I do not remember prisoners of his category not having access to television for occasional shows, special shows.
Like podcasts, like the 1970s podcasts that we all
had? The
had?
Ronald Reagan podcasts, yes, and Gerald Ford, and, yes, exactly. He continued. Steve
by the way,
Bannon
back then, 4 channels on television. Okay.
Yes, special shows were. Oh my God!
The
Giuliani
Wizard of Oz
continued
on Sunday.
Right. So Steve Bannon is not being treated the way other prisoners are being treated. His case has been moved from the Bureau of Prisons to crooked Attorney General Garland's office, and they're calling the shots because contacts that I have in the Bureau of Prisons have told me they've been taken out of the case, Giuliani continued. He's being, let's say, tortured. This election is about a fascist regime, and Steve Bannon is prime number 1 victim.
Oh, God.
Now, as the new abnormal co-host Andy Levy points out, the only true thing he said there is this is an election about a fascist regime. Yeah, that was good. That was accurate, said fellow co-host Danielle Moody. Nobody needs to hear from Rudy Giuliani again on any subject. So the fact that this guy who is the mayor of New York, who ran for president, who served as an associate attorney general or whatever under president, is now reduced to sitting there and talking to Mike Lindell. I mean, I don't know what more you need to know, concluded Levy. And then Moody added, he's a lapdog. He needs to go where he can be fed.
Oh, yeah. Kind of like the Lindsay fish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lindsey Graham only goes where the power is. And Rudy goes where the money is.
Yeah, I just, and the thing about Lindell, going back to the convention, you have to, in addition to the image of the freshly shorn, no mustache Lindell getting handed his ass to him by a 12-year-old, he's also dressed in what some Twitter commentator termed a Roger Stone fedora looking like the uncle in Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? So, or
San Diego.
San Diego, Santiago. Yes, California thing, right?
Kind of had an Uncle Rico Goes to Easter vibe to me from Napoleon Dynamite, sort of.
Yeah, and he started going in. He would not let go, and just kept going and going and going, and had like, no, come on, man, you were yelling at a 12-year-old. What are you doing? What? And it just didn't, and
nothing clicked.
You can see the yarn strung between the different charts in his mind, and he's trying to go through all the figures and the incoherent ramblings of a man who has lost touch with reality.
Yeah,
all captured on tape by a 12-year-old.
Yeah. It was hard to follow. I think he was trying to say something like there were 3 Democrats who also were cheated out of victories, but he wouldn't name them. And remember, this is a guy who had the cyber symposium, who put a guy up there who started sharing stolen voter data from Mesa County, Colorado, and then immediately got a call during that live stream from his lawyer and said, I got to go. And then just left the entire conversation because he was there. He was being piped in virtually. And now, that we just had the sentencing of Tina Peters in that case. And some of her co-conspirators had already pled guilty. But yeah, it's the party of indicted and convicted criminals. I don't know how else to. And the fact that the media is just like, well, we wonder what they're going to say at the debates, and we're going to how they're going to present their campaigns, and where are the polls, and what's the funding look like, and should we have a hot mic? And I want to report on all this stuff, but like, come on.
Yeah. And they're all, so many of them are, and this is why it's so brilliant on the part of the Harris campaign. They're all so weird. It is when you listen to Lindell, when you listen to like Kash Patel, when you listen to Mike
Rudy,
Flynn, when
Bannon,
you listen to Rudy,
Alex Jones.
they start reciting all these bizarre, unrelated numbers and figures and names and dates and events that are incoherent. And it's like they're just reaching into a jumble of catchphrases and numbers and throwing them out like it makes any sense, because only the crazy QAnon MAGA few actually were like, oh, yes. And to anybody else, including a 12-year-old with a working brain, it is apparent that it's just insanity. And it's so easy. And Ron Johnson is a great example of this. He just gets out and starts babbling, random Andre Derkach and Biden and Hunter and laptop. And you put him in front of anybody who is someone other than the right-wing bubble, and he completely melts down and falls apart because they can't respond to the first logical question. And it's weird. I mean, it's really weird. The closest analog I can find is that if you have a relative or a friend or a neighbor who's very advanced in age, they aren't quite in command of facts and detail, and they're also isolated. And so when they come across you, they latch onto that human contact and just start talking at you and not stopping in a way that if it were a normal human being, I would have profound empathy and a little bit of sadness. But it's the entirety of this crazy ass party who is malicious and set on destroying democracy. And it's
weird. It's reflected in the endorsements, right? A bunch of lawyers for Romney and former Republicans have endorsed Harris Wallace. We had so many speakers from the Trump administration and former and current Republicans speaking at the DNC. And just now, this is breaking just now, the Arizona Police Association. Let me repeat that. The Arizona Police Association has endorsed Ruben Gallego for Senate over Kari Lake. That is actually, I'm actually a little shocked by that a police union would endorse a Democrat. But they are, because these guys are criminals.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And taking your analogy, even like, look at the endorsements. Who does Trump have, by the way? Endorsement-wise, just picked up RFK Jr., apparently went to a beach with his daughter and took a chainsaw to a whale head, strapped it to the roof of the car, and according to his daughter, as they were driving down the road, bystanders and other people in cars were yelling at them, in part because of the what she termed quote unquote whale juice. that would come out of the head on the side of the car. And the other freak show crazy endorsement that he picked up politically today was Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard.
So you're absolutely
My
right.
favorite Russian
look at the
asset.
endorsements. Look at we're busy talking about like, hey, ask me about biolabs in Ukraine. It's insane and
Uranium
weird.
One. She's going to bring up Uranium One
weird.
again. Watch.
Just so weird. So bizarre.
Anyway, you love to see it. I'm actually. I'm having
bring up?
so,
I know we're out of time, but do you want to mention the Trump quote that you brought to my attention?
I'm having so much fun.
Before,
yeah.
Right before we started taping.
You know how they share some like moments of him on the mic. Today it was something about somebody named Hung Hung Cao Cao, and Trump said something about how he loved the name Hung Cao, and if he had the name Hung Cao, somebody with the name Hung Cao could win an election. What was it? Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah, Hung Cao. I love that name. The name alone will get you elected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what we're up against. And frankly, I'm actually having a really good time. I'm having a good time with this campaign. There's a lot of positivity. There's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of joy. And frankly, I love it. Despite what the New York Times says, joy is not a strategy. Yes, it is. Hope is a strategy. Joy is a strategy. And so are the giant list of pages of policy that Kamala Harris is running on. That's also a strategy. And her campaign ground game, $540 million raised since she announced, and tens of thousands of volunteers in battleground states and other states across the country, and setting up those offices, setting up door knocks, doing all the calls. That's also a strategy. So, I know a lot of people are moving away from the mainstream media, who, by the way, complained ad nauseum about the fact that the creators, 200 content creators, were allowed at the convention and got some pretty good access to the delegates and candidates where we got to create the content. But, just a simple message for legacy media and mainstream media. If you do not adapt, if you do not embrace the independent media, like us, like Clean Up on Aisle 45, the MSW Media Pods, Daily Beans, these content creators, if you don't adapt and incorporate us and welcome us, you are going to end up like the major record labels from decades ago when the music industry switched over to independent artists and left these corporate scumbag major record labels in the dust. That is what your fate is if you do not adapt. And so I'm just putting that out there. I'm just putting that out there. I've been working on this project for a long time, and I've been saying for years, adapt or perish, and they seem to be choosing perish. But that's okay. We're here. We're here for the new. We're here with you every week. And I'm there with Dana for the Daily Beans every day. And this Sunday, I'll be with Andy McCabe for the Jack podcast. We can talk about Jack Smith's appeal to overturn Eileen Cannon's dismissal. He didn't ask for a recusal yet, but we'll talk about that. So thank you again. And thanks to our Hall of Fame patrons for supporting independent media, because we're here and we're not going anywhere. And, I'm glad that you trust us to bring you the news, whether we're Democrats, Republicans, Independents, or whatever. We're here for the facts and a little bit of snark and some swearing on the bonus episode. So thank you again. Pete, do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here today?
Heading to the home stretch, right? This time next week, as you're listening, we'll be 2 months out from the election. So buckle in. We're getting close. Got a lot to come between now and then. And I'm going to go reread Jack Smith's submission, highlighting yet again, make me angry all over again at Judge Eileen Cannon and what a horrible jurist she is.
Yes. And in the immortal words of my favorite first lady of all time, Michelle Obama, do something. Get out there, postcard, knock doors, text bank, hold a debate watch party at your house. Invite people who might not otherwise be voting. Tell them about Project 2025 or have them come over to your house and watch the debate so Kamala Harris can talk about Project 2025. And so, do something. And everybody, we'll see you next week. I've been Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Strzok.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.